The old female walked slowly through the dusty streets of the human outpost. She held the hand of a small hatchling who stumbled with every step. The hatchling's eyes were open, but they saw nothing. They had never seen anything since the day she was born. Grandmother had traveled for 6 days to reach this place. She had visited every healer in the empire. She had begged the finest physicians to examine her grandchild. They all said the same thing. The hatchling called was broken. Her eyes worked, but her brain could not understand what they showed her. There was no cure. Among the people, such hatchlings were usually left in the wilderness to die, had refused to do this. She loved too much. Now she stood outside a small building with strange human writing on the door. Someone had told her about a human mechanic who worked with machines that could help broken bodies. It was her last hope. Lucy Grant was working on a damaged cargo loader when she heard the door open. She looked up and saw two standing in her workshop. They were a proud species that looked like the dragons from old Earth legends. They had scales and wings and sharp teeth. Most humans found them frightening. Lucy had repaired enough ships to know they were just people like anyone else. The older one spoke in broken human language. She explained that her grandchild was blind. She explained that no doctor could help. She asked if the human mechanic could do anything. Lucy put down her tools and walked over to the small hatchling. Was tiny compared to adult. Her scales were a soft purple color, and her wings were still too small for flight. Her eyes moved around the room but focused on nothing. Lucy knelt down in front of the hatchling. She spoke softly and told that she was going to examine her, flinched at the unfamiliar voice but did not pull away. Lucy used a small scanner to look at the hatchling's eyes and brain. After several minutes, she understood the problem. The eyes were perfect. They captured light and sent signals to the brain just as they should. But the part of the brain that was supposed to receive those signals had never developed properly. It was like having a perfect camera connected to a computer that did not have the right software to display the pictures. Lucy sat back and thought about the problem. Biology was different from human biology in many ways, but the basic principles of neural interfaces were universal. She had built vision systems for humans who had lost their sight in accidents. She had never built one for but the concept was the same. She told grandmother that she could help. She could build a special helmet that would take the visual information and translate it into a format that's brain could understand. It would not be natural sight. It would be different, but would be able to see. The old's eyes filled with tears. She asked how much this would cost. Lucy looked at the small hatchling who was carefully touching the tools on the workbench with her tiny clawed hands. She was exploring the world the only way she knew how. Lucy felt something stir in her chest. She told that there would be no charge. Helping the hatchling was enough. Did not understand this. Among the everything had a price. Warriors fought for glory. Merchants traded for profit. Healers worked for payment. The idea that someone would do something difficult for nothing was strange to her. Lucy simply smiled and said that humans were strange creatures. She began working on the helmet that same day. The first step was mapping neural pathways. This required the hatchling to sit still for several hours while Lucy's machine scanned her brain, was patient and calm. She had spent her whole life in darkness and had learned to wait. During the scanning process, Lucy talked too. She told her about Earth and its blue oceans and green forests. She described the sun rising over mountains and the stars filling the night sky, listened with her whole body leaning forward. She had heard descriptions of the world before, but something about the way Lucy spoke made her want to see these things more than ever. When the scanning was done, Lucy let explore the workshop. The hatchling moved carefully from table to table. She touched everything with her small hands. She smelled the oil and metal and electronics. She listened to the hum of machines and the distant sounds of ships landing at the outpost. Lucy watched her and felt a growing determination. This small creature deserved to see the universe. She deserved to know what colors looked like. She deserved to watch the stars. The workshop became temporary home. Grandmother stayed in a small room nearby, but the hatchling preferred to be close to Lucy. She would sit quietly while Lucy worked on the helmet. Sometimes she would ask questions about what Lucy was doing. Lucy would explain in simple terms and would nod even though she could not see the components Lucy described. Days passed. Lucy worked late into the night and woke early each morning. Her assistant Pete Dawson helped with the technical work. He was a younger mechanic who had come to Seven looking for adventure. He found something else instead. He found purpose in helping Lucy build something that would change a young life. Pete taught simple games that she could play without sight. They would tap out rhythms and would repeat them. They would make sounds and would identify what made them. The hatchling was smart and quick to learn. Pete told Lucy that was going to be something special once she could see. Lucy agreed. She worked faster. Commander Holt visited the workshop one evening. She was the military officer in charge of the small human garrison on Seven. She had heard about the hatchling and wanted to see for herself. She watched playing with Pete and then looked at the half-finished helmet on Lucy's workbench. She told Lucy that relations with the Empire had been difficult lately. There were disputes over territory and trade routes. Some people thought war might come, but she said that what Lucy was doing here might matter more than any diplomatic meeting. Kindness between individuals built bridges that politicians could never create. Lucy nodded but did not look up from her work. She was not thinking about politics or diplomacy. She was thinking about a small hatchling who had never seen a sunrise. She was thinking about the moment when would finally open her eyes and see the world. That moment was coming soon. 3 weeks had passed since Grandmother brought to the human outpost. In that time, the workshop had become a second home for the small hatchling. She knew every corner by touch. She knew the sound of Lucy's footsteps and the smell of Pete's morning coffee. She had learned many human words and could speak simple sentences in their language. Lucy had barely slept during those 3 weeks. The Vision helmet was the most complex thing she had ever built. Neural pathways were different from human ones in ways that required constant adjustment to her designs. Every time she thought she had solved one problem, she discovered another. But now the helmet was finished. It sat on the workbench looking like a crown made of metal and crystal. Thin wires ran through it like veins. Small sensors dotted its surface. A soft padding lined the inside where it would rest against its head. Lucy had tested every component 100 times. She had run simulations until her eyes burned from staring at screens. She was as certain as she could be that it would work. Grandmother stood in the corner of the workshop. Her old hands were clasped together tightly. She had waited so long for this moment that she was afraid to believe it was finally here. Pete stood near the door. He had grown fond of the little hatchling over the past weeks. He had taught her games and told her stories about Earth. He wanted this to work more than he had wanted anything in a long time. Lucy knelt in front of. She held the helmet in her hands and explained what was about to happen. She told that she would place the helmet on her head. There would be a moment of darkness and then there would be light. The light might be confusing at first. The world might look strange. But Lucy would be right there to help her understand what she was seeing. Nodded, her small body was trembling but not from fear. She was trembling with hope. Lucy carefully placed the helmet on the hatchling's head. She adjusted the straps to make sure it fit properly. She checked the connections one more time. Then she took a deep breath and pressed the activation button. For a moment nothing happened, sat perfectly still. Her eyes were open but unfocused just as they had always been. Then something changed. The hatchling's eyes widened. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Her tiny hands reached up toward her face as if she could not believe what was happening. Colors flooded into her mind for the first time. She saw the metal of the workshop walls. She saw the warm yellow of the lights overhead. She saw the bright red of Lucy's jacket. She saw the deep purple of her own scales reflected in a piece of polished metal. Tears began to fall from her eyes. did not cry often but could not stop the tears from coming. She was seeing. After years of darkness, she was finally seeing. She looked at Lucy. She saw a human face for the first time. She saw kind eyes and a gentle smile. She saw worry and hope mixed together in one expression. She reached out with her small hand and touched Lucy's cheek. Her first words in the human language came out in a whisper. She said that Lucy was beautiful. Lucy laughed and cried at the same time. She pulled the hatchling into a gentle hug and told her that she was beautiful too. Grandmother came forward, looked at her and saw her grandmother for the first time. She saw the old scales worn smooth by time. She saw the lines around her eyes that came from years of worry and love. She saw tears streaming down a face she had only known through touch. Spoke in her own language now. She told her grandmother that she could see her. She told her that she was more wonderful than she had ever imagined. The old fell to her knees and held her grandchild. They stayed like that for a long time while Lucy and Pete watched from a respectful distance. When grandmother finally stood up, she turned to Lucy. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small pouch filled with precious gems. She tried to give them to Lucy as payment for what she had done. Lucy gently pushed the pouch back. She said that seeing's face when she opened her eyes was all the payment she needed. She said that some things were more valuable than gems. Did not understand this kind of thinking, but she was beginning to see that humans were different from what she had believed. They did things that made no sense from a perspective. They gave without expecting anything in return. They helped strangers simply because those strangers needed help. Over the next few days, explored the outpost with new eyes. Everything amazed her. She watched ships land and take off from the small spaceport. She stared at the stars for hours when night came. She studied the faces of every human and alien she met as if trying to memorize every detail. She spent most of her time with Lucy. She watched the mechanic work and asked endless questions. What was that tool called? What did that machine do? Why was that wire connected to that panel? Lucy answered every question patiently. She found that she enjoyed teaching the curious hatchling. Pete showed pictures of Earth on a display screen. She saw oceans and mountains and forests. She saw cities filled with millions of humans. She saw animals she had never imagined. Each image made her hungrier to see more. Commander Holt came to the workshop again. She wanted to see the results of Lucy's work. When she saw looking around the room with clear, focused eyes, she smiled. She said that Lucy had done something remarkable. She said that this small act of kindness might change how they thought about humans. Lucy shrugged. She had not done it for politics. She had done it because a child needed help and she could provide that help. It was as simple as that. That night, the outpost's long-range sensors detected something strange at the edge of the system. A cluster of energy signatures that did not match any known species. The technician on duty noted it in the log but did not raise an alarm. Strange readings were common in deep space. It was probably nothing. Stood outside the workshop looking up at the stars. Lucy stood beside her. The hatchling asked if humans had a home star that they could see from here. Lucy pointed to a tiny dot of light near the horizon. She said that was Sol. That was where humanity began. Stared at that tiny light for a long time. She said that she wanted to visit Earth someday. She wanted to see the oceans and mountains that Pete had shown her pictures of. Lucy told her that she would take her there one day. They would walk on beaches and climb hills and watch the sun set over water. It was a promise made in the quiet of the night under strange stars. Neither of them knew that very soon everything would change. Neither of them knew that darkness was coming to swallow the light that had just discovered. But for that moment, they simply stood together and watched the stars. 1 week had passed since first opened her eyes to the world. 7 days of wonder and discovery. 7 days of learning what colors meant and how shadows fell, and why the stars seemed to dance when the wind blew through the atmosphere. She had never been happier in her short life. She was helping Lucy organize spare parts in the workshop when the alarms began to sound. The noise was loud and sharp, had never heard anything like it. She covered her ears with her small hands and looked at Lucy with fear in her eyes. Lucy's face had gone pale. She grabbed hand and ran toward the main building of the outpost. Commander Holt was standing in the command center, surrounded by screens filled with data. Her officers were speaking rapidly and pointing at different displays. The tension in the room was thick enough to feel against the skin. Lucy asked what was happening. Holt turned to face her. The commander's expression was grim. She explained that the strange readings from last week had resolved into something terrible. A fleet had entered the system. Not dozens of ships, not hundreds. Over 2,000 vessels painted black as space itself. They belonged to the collective. Lucy felt her stomach drop. Everyone knew about the. They were a species that existed only to consume. They traveled from system to system, taking everything organic they could find. Planets they visited became dead rocks. Species they encountered became food. They had no diplomacy and no mercy. They simply consumed and moved on. Did not understand the words, but she understood the fear in everyone's faces. She pressed closer to Lucy and held her hand. Holt continued. The fleet was heading toward the. Seven sat directly in their path. The outpost had maybe 6 hours before the first ships arrived. The human garrison had 200 soldiers and a handful of defensive weapons. Against 2,300 ships they had no chance. She ordered an immediate evacuation of all civilians. Transport ships would begin loading in 1 hour. Everyone who was not a soldier would be taken to safety. Grandmother appeared at the door. She had heard the alarms and come looking for. Her old face was tight with worry. She asked what was happening and Holt told her. Immediately tried to contact the Empire. She sent messages to every military channel she knew. The responses came back slowly. The fleet was out of position. They had been expecting the to attack from a different direction. Most of their ships were on the far side of their territory. Help would take many hours to arrive. One response came from High Warlord. He was a famous warrior and commander of the Third Fleet. He was also a distant relative of through bloodlines that stretched back generations. His face appeared on the communication screen looking impatient and annoyed. He asked why he should care about a remote outpost. He asked why resources should be diverted to save an old female and a blind hatchling. They needed every ship to defend the. Tried to explain but was not listening. He was about to end the communication when stepped forward. The small hatchling looked directly at the screen. Her vision helmet gleamed under the lights. Her eyes focused on the warlord with perfect clarity. She spoke in the language with a voice that did not shake. She told that she could see him. She told him that a human mechanic had given her sight when every healer had failed. She told him that humans were fighting to protect aliens they had never met. She asked him what kind of warrior abandoned allies who were willing to die for his people. The warlord stared at her through the screen. Something changed in his expression. He had expected a pitiful blind creature begging for help. Instead, he saw a young who looked at him with fierce pride in her eyes. Eyes that worked because a human had cared enough to help. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said that he would send what ships he could. 12 vessels could be diverted without weakening the main defense. It was not much against 2,300 enemies, but it was something. The communication ended. 12 ships. It was better than nothing, but everyone knew it would not be enough. Commander Holt began organizing the evacuation. Civilians were hurried toward the transport ships. Lucy was told to gather her things and prepare to leave. She did not move. She looked around her workshop at the tools and machines she had spent years collecting. She looked at the workbench where she had built helmet. She looked at the small hatchling standing beside her with trust in her newly seeing eyes. Lucy told Holt that she was not leaving. Holt started to argue, but Lucy interrupted her. She said that she had weapons in this workshop. She had drones and automated defenses. She had spent 20 years learning how to build things that could protect and things that could destroy. If they wanted this outpost, they would have to go through her workshop first. Pete stepped forward. He said that he was staying too. He was not much of a soldier, but he could shoot straight and he was not afraid. Holt looked at them for a long moment. Then she nodded. She said that every defender mattered. She told them to fortify their position and prepare for combat. Refused to evacuate. Grandmother tried to convince her, but the hatchling would not listen. She said that Lucy had given her everything. She would not run away while Lucy stayed to fight. She would stay and help however she could. Looked at her grandchild with new eyes. The frightened blind hatchling she had brought to this outpost was gone. In her place stood a young with steel in her spine and fire in her heart. The old female made her decision. She would stay too. She was old and her fighting days were long past, but she could still hold a weapon. She could still stand beside those who had given her grandchild the gift of sight. Lucy began working immediately. She converted her repair drones into combat units. She built automated turrets from spare parts. She reinforced the walls of the workshop with metal plating. She created a small defensive drone that could be controlled through his vision helmet. The hatchling's neural interface made her perfect for piloting it. Outside the outpost, the sky grew dark as the first ships entered the atmosphere. They looked like black insects descending on a wounded animal. Their hulls absorbed light and their engines made no sound. The battle for Seven was about to begin. Captain Dale Fisher gathered his 200 soldiers in the main plaza. He told them that they faced impossible odds. He told them that most of them would probably die today. Then he told them that dying was not the point. The point was to buy time for the civilians to escape. The point was to show the galaxy that humans did not abandon their friends. The soldiers checked their weapons and took their positions. In her workshop, Lucy handed grandmother a rifle and showed her how to use it. The old's hands were steady as she took the weapon. Her eyes were calm. Sat in a chair with the drone controls connected to her helmet. Through the drone's sensors, she could see the black ships landing outside the outpost. She could see the creatures emerging from them. They were terrible to look at, all teeth and claws and hunger. She was afraid, but she did not look away. Lucy had given her sight so that she could see the world. Now she would use that sight to protect the person who had given it to her. The first reached the outpost perimeter. The shooting began. They came in waves. They poured out of their black ships like water from a broken dam. Thousands of them rushed toward the outpost with nothing in their minds but hunger. They did not care about death. They did not feel fear. They only wanted to consume. Captain Dale Fisher stood on the front line with his soldiers. Their weapons fired constantly. Each shot dropped, but two more took its place. The air filled with the smell of burning flesh and the screams of dying creatures. Commander Holt coordinated the defense from the command center. She moved units from position to position as weak points appeared. She called in orbital strikes from the few human ships in orbit. She did everything a commander could do against impossible odds. In the workshop, Lucy watched the battle through security cameras while working on more weapons. Her hands never stopped moving. Every minute she finished another turret or modified another drone. Pete loaded ammunition and ran supplies to the defenders. Grandmother guarded the door with her rifle ready. Flew her drone through the chaos of battle. Through its sensors, she could see things that others missed. Her vision helmet detected heat signatures and movement patterns that human eyes could not perceive. When she saw trying to flank a group of soldiers, she warned them. When she spotted enemies climbing walls, she called out their positions. Her small voice came through the communication system over and over. On the left, behind the storage building, breaking through the fence. The soldiers learned to trust her warnings. Her drone became their eye in the sky. The fighting went on for hours. Human soldiers fell, but they took many with them. Each position was held until it could not be held anymore. Each retreat was ordered and controlled. They were losing slowly, but they were making the enemy pay for every meter of ground. Admiral Santos pushed her battle group toward the system at maximum speed. Her ships were still hours away, but she monitored the situation through long-range communications. She heard the desperate messages from Seven. She heard the casualty reports and the calls for help. She pushed her engines harder, knowing that every minute mattered. The Hive commander watched the battle from its flagship in orbit. The creature that controlled the fleet was not like the others. It had intelligence and patience. It studied the human defense and felt something it rarely felt: annoyance. A single outpost was causing too many casualties. The humans fought with a ferocity that surprised the Hive commander. They did not run when they should run. They did not surrender when surrender was their only chance of survival. They simply kept fighting. The Hive commander directed more forces towards Seven. Hundreds more landed around the outpost. The black tide grew larger. On the ground, Captain Fisher, his remaining soldiers, less than 100, were still standing. They formed a defensive circle around the main buildings. Their ammunition was running low. Their bodies were exhausted, but their will remained unbroken. Lucy's workshop became a fortress within the larger battle. Her automated turrets cut down that came too close. Her drones harassed enemy flanks. The walls she had reinforced held against repeated attacks. But even fortresses could fall. A group broke through a weak section of wall. They poured into the workshop before Lucy could react. She grabbed a weapon and fired, but there were too many. One of them lunged at her and knocked her to the ground. Screamed. She saw Lucy fall through her drone's cameras. She saw the standing over the human who had given her everything. Without thinking, she sent her drone diving toward the creatures. It crashed into the first one and exploded in a burst of fire and metal. The explosion killed 3 and drove the others back. Pete rushed forward and pulled Lucy to safety. She was wounded. Blood ran from a gash on her arm and her face was pale with pain, but she was alive. Grandmother stood over them with her rifle firing at any that came near. The old fought with the ferocity of someone protecting her family. Her shots were not always accurate, but her courage never wavered. They held the workshop, barely. During a brief pause in the fighting came to Lucy's side. The hatchling's eyes were wide with fear and something else. Something that looked like rage. She had never felt such anger before. The idea that someone might take Lucy from her made her feel things she did not know how to name. She asked Lucy why humans fought like this. Why did they die for people who were not their own kind? Why did they stand against darkness when running would be so much easier? Lucy looked at the small hatchling. Blood was soaking through the bandage on her arm. Her body ached from exhaustion, but she smiled with warmth in her eyes. She said that humans believed in something simple. If someone needed help and you could help them, then you should help them. It did not matter if they were human or any other species. It did not matter if helping was hard or dangerous. What mattered was that someone needed help and you had the power to give it. Stared at her. In that moment she understood something about humans that no had ever understood before. They were not just clever builders and fighters. They were something more. They were creatures who would burn themselves to give light to others. Outside the workshop the battle raged on. The defenders were being pushed back step by step. Ammunition ran low. More soldiers fell. The end seemed near. Then new signals appeared on the sensors. 12 ships dropped out of hyperspace above 7. They were warships painted in the colors of the Third Fleet. High Warlord had kept his promise. The ships dove into battle without hesitation. They were outnumbered more than 100 to 1, but they attacked with the fury of their ancestors. Himself led the charge in his flagship. His voice came over the communication channels, roaring battle cries in the old tongue. He announced to everyone listening that the humans of 7 had earned something rare. They had earned the respect of his house. Any species willing to die for a blind hatchling deserved the loyalty of true warriors. The fleet turned to engage the new threat. This gave the defenders on the ground a moment of relief. The waves of enemies slowed as the Hive commander redirected resources to deal with the ships. But 12 ships could not win this battle. They could only delay the inevitable. Knew this, he fought anyway. The minutes stretched into hours. Ships exploded in space above the outpost. Soldiers died in the streets below. The defense began to crumble despite everything. Then every sensor in the system detected a massive energy signature approaching. Something was coming. Something big. Admiral Santos had arrived. 40 human warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Admiral Santos stood on the bridge of her flagship and surveyed the chaos before her. Black vessels filled the space around 7. Ships fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. Below them, the outpost burned. She gave the order to attack. Human weapons tore into the fleet. The black ships had never faced a concentrated human battle group before. They did not know how to respond to the precision and coordination of Santos's forces. Vessels began to explode one after another. On the ground, the defenders saw the explosions lighting up the sky. Captain Dale Fisher raised his fist and shouted in triumph. His soldiers found new strength. They pushed back against with renewed ferocity. In the workshop, Lucy watched the battle through her cameras. She was weak from blood loss but refused to rest. Pete had bandaged her arm and given her stimulants to keep her awake. She needed to see how this ended. Sat beside her. The hatchling had lost her drone in the earlier explosion, but she could still watch through the security feeds. She saw the human ships fighting in the darkness of space. She saw the warships diving through enemy formations. She saw hope where there had been only despair. But the still had numbers on their side. Even with the human battle group, the enemy fleet was larger. The tide had turned, but the battle was not won. The Hive commander calculated the situation. Victory was still possible, but the cost would be enormous. The humans fought with unexpected skill and determination. Every minute brought more casualties to the collective. Then something happened that the Hive commander did not expect. Had been thinking while she watched the battle. Her vision helmet was connected to Lucy's workshop systems. Those systems were connected to the outpost's main communication array. Through that connection, she could reach far beyond 7. She began to speak. Her voice went out across all frequencies. It reached human ships and vessels. It reached the listening posts of the Empire. It reached the itself. She spoke in her native language. She told everyone who could hear about what had happened on 7. She told them about a blind hatchling who had been born into darkness. She told them about a human mechanic who had given that hatchling the gift of sight. She described Lucy's kindness. She described how the human had worked for weeks without payment. She described the moment when light first entered her eyes, and the first thing she saw was Lucy's gentle face. She told them about the battle. She told them about 200 human soldiers fighting against thousands of enemies to protect aliens they had never met. She told them about Captain Fisher and his courage. She told them about Pete and grandmother standing guard in the workshop. She told them about Lucy taking a wound while defending her. She asked the people a question. What kind of empire turned away from allies like these? What kind of warriors ignored those who would die for a blind hatchling? What kind of people were they if they let the humans stand alone? Her words reached the fleet defending the. They reached the emperor himself sitting on his ancient throne. They reached every warrior and citizen with ears to hear. The emperor listened to the voice of a young hatchling speaking from a burning outpost. He heard the truth in her words. He felt shame that humans had shown more honor than his own people. He gave an order that had not been given in 10,000 years. The full battle fleet would move to 7. 300 warships changed course. They engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished from the defensive perimeter. The Emperor was gambling everything on a moment of faith. Minutes later, the fleet arrived. They emerged from hyperspace behind the formation. 300 fresh warships against an enemy already bloodied by humans and the Third Fleet. The black ships were caught between two forces. High Warlord roared with joy when he saw his people's fleet. He led his remaining ships in a new attack. Admiral Santos coordinated with the commanders, human, and fought side by side for the first time in history. The Hive commander made a calculation. The battle was lost. Continuing to fight would mean the destruction of the entire fleet. The collective could not afford such losses. It ordered a retreat. The black ships broke formation and fled. They scattered in every direction, seeking escape from the combined fury of two species. Human and vessels pursued them but let most escape. The important thing was that they were running. 7 was saved. On the ground, the remaining died quickly without support from orbit. The soldiers hunted them down one by one. By dawn, the outpost was secure. Lucy sat in her ruined workshop surrounded by debris and the remains of her machines. Her arm throbbed with pain. Her body was exhausted beyond words, but she was smiling. Sat beside her. The hatchling had not left her side since the battle ended. She held Lucy's uninjured hand and refused to let go. A shuttle landed outside the workshop. High Warlord emerged in full ceremonial armor. He walked through the rubble until he stood before Lucy. Then he did something no warlord had ever done before a human. He knelt. He thanked her in the human custom. He said that she had given his people a gift they could never repay, not just the helmet that let see. She had given them an example of what true honor looked like. Lucy was embarrassed by the attention. She said that she had just done what anyone would do. She had helped someone who needed help. It was not complicated. Rose and looked at her with respect in his ancient eyes. He said that was exactly what made humans remarkable. They thought kindness was simple. They thought compassion was ordinary. They did not understand how rare such things were in the cold darkness between stars. A representative of the Emperor arrived later that day. She carried a message from the throne. The Emperor declared that the Empire would sign a full alliance with humanity. It was the first such alliance in 10,000 years of history. From this day forward, humans and would stand together. The representative said that this alliance was born from a single act of kindness. A mechanic helping a blind hatchling. That small moment had changed the fate of two civilizations. Announced that she would not leave 7. She wanted to stay with Lucy and learn from her. She wanted to become a mechanic herself someday. She wanted to help others the way Lucy had helped her. Grandmother gave her blessing. She was proud of what her grandchild had become. The frightened blind hatchling was gone forever. In her place stood a young with purpose and courage and vision. Weeks passed. The outpost was rebuilt. Lucy's workshop was restored and expanded. Engineers came to work alongside human mechanics. The alliance grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, Lucy stood outside the workshop watching the stars. The hatchling had grown taller in the months since receiving her helmet. Her scales had darkened to a deeper purple. Her wings were almost large enough for flight. Asked if Lucy remembered her promise, the promise to take her to Earth someday. Lucy smiled and said she remembered. Said she wanted to go there. She wanted to see the oceans and mountains, but more than that, she wanted to meet other humans. She wanted to understand the species that had given her sight and changed the fate of empires. Lucy put her arm around the young. She said they would go together. They would walk on beaches and climb hills and watch the sun set over water. She would show everything beautiful that humanity had created. Leaned against her. Through the vision helmet, she could see the stars spreading across the infinite darkness. Each one was a sun with worlds circling it. Each one was a place she could now see. The helmet had given her sight, but Lucy had shown her what was worth seeing.